Violence and video games. They sure do come hand in hand, don't they? And they've been sparking controversy since the dawn of time, and still does to this day. Violence in video games sure do come in all shapes and sizes. Whether you're shooting down demons in Doom, whacking demons in the face with a 2x4 in Splatterhouse, or maybe, just maybe, you beat your opponent up to submission only to follow up with a vicious way of eliminating your opponent for good. That's right, folks. I am talking about Mortal Kombat!
Mortal Kombat hit the arcades in 1992 and is Midway's answer to the popularity of Capcom's Street Fighter II. Those were the two fighting games people would play during the early 90s when arcades were still a big deal back in the day. Unlike Street Fighter II for its speedy gameplay, Mortal Kombat is all about defensive fighting and has a 5-button scheme, great use of digitized characters, although Pit Fighter did it first, and for the amount of violence that contains. So much so that it gave birth to what we now know as the ESRB rating system, resulting in console versions having to be toned down, like having no blood at all in the Genesis port, unless you enter a code on a specific screen. But starting with Mortal Kombat 2 and onwards, it's bloodbath and beyond, with all the various fatalities you can inflict on your opponent by entering specific commands that you could find on magazines like GamePro at the time. Trigger it, and watch it go.
Whenever a game or a series becomes successful, companies every now and then will try to experiment with different genres in order to milk their franchise. Case in point, today's review is Mortal Kombat Mythologies Sub-Zero. Rather than a fighting game, this game is an adventure game with fighting elements that made the series famous.
During the success of Mortal Kombat Trilogy, Midway wanted to make a series of Mortal Kombat action games focusing on the stories of specific characters. Sadly, only 3 of those kinds were made, and only one of them is decent. I've seen this game in action during the late 90s, and I was interested in playing it at first, but I passed it on when I had a backlog of PS1 games to complete. It wasn't until the mid-2000s that I finally tried it out with my own hands. Needless to say, I kind of regretted that. The game starts off with Sub-Zero breaking into the Shaolin Temple to steal a map for the Lin Kuei clan. However, Scorpion was also after the same map, and Sub-Zero gives chase. Right away, the game controls like a typical Mortal Kombat game, but with the addition of a button to turn around. It's essential when you need to face your opponent properly to fight him, or just simply make a run for it. It is irritating at first, sure, but eventually you'll get used to it. But that's only the start, because immediately, you can't perform any of your signature moves, and you start to wonder whether or not your controller is broken. No, that's not the case. You see, that's when the game tells you of its RPG elements. You gain experience by defeating enemies or performing combos against your opponents. Only then would you learn both the Freeze Blast and Slide, 2 of his signature moves that should have been available right from the start. Sadly, that's all the experience system does, just learning new moves. So don't expect any raise in HP or SP anytime in this game. All throughout the game, Sub-Zero can learn more than just his 2 signature moves. He can learn Ice Blast upwards, downwards, create a clone of himself, or dash forward to freeze an enemy. Each stage has an experience cap that you can't go over it until you advance to more stages, where you grind some more to gain new moves, which is easier said than done. Especially in the first stage, where there are traps that can outright crush you to death unless you trigger it with a sweep. But even then, it's possible to suffer knockback from it, and yeah, knockback is one of the many enemies you'll encounter in this game, and I'll get to the rest as we move along. At the end of the first stage, you'll fight Scorpion for the map, and after his last HP, you can choose to spare him or finish him, the latter of which I actually did. Sub-Zero then returns to his headquarters, where he presents the Grandmaster with the map. Enter the evil sorcerer Quan Chi, making his in-game appearance before Mortal Kombat 4. He's in need of Sub-Zero's help to acquire an amulet, which is impossible for him unless the temples of Wind, Earth, Water, and Fire have fallen.
4 temples of the elements? Yeah, they're basically trying to rip off Final Fantasy's plot device that you might as well rename this game as Combat Fantasy Sub-Zero's Quest. And you're gonna love Sub-Zero's bravery going into Stage 2. He's actually climbing up a mountain without any safety equipment to save himself. Then again, Ryu can do that in the Street Fighter 2 animated movies, so joke's on me.
I can tell you right now that in later stages after stage 1, that's when the problems arise, with more ways to fall and more problems with depth perception. In stage 2, you'll have to traverse the stage with wind currents that can make you fly, but there's also rotating platforms and swinging platforms which 90% of the time, you will miss your mark due to problems of depth perception. I've lost so many lives and continues just by missing the mark of those platforms, and whenever you fall, at least on the PlayStation 1 version, it follows up with a cheesy cutscene of Sub-Zero falling and screaming like an idiot, and each falling scene differs in each stage. Yes, you'll be falling a lot in this game. While you can increase the number of lives and continues, this game will have you blaze through them so quickly that passing through stage 2 is impossible.
So for the sake of showing the rest of the game, I had to consult the passwords of the game from this big PlayStation book. Heavy emphasis on the word big. That along with using a Game Shark cheating device because, well, let's face it, this game is difficult. You might as well use these options to save yourself some time. And making sure you don't go insane from this.
Stage 2's boss is the Wind God, Fujin, who also makes his debut in this game. His AI can sometimes either be aggressive or simply brain dead, allowing yourself for an open shot, and he loves being the Tasmanian devil in the air, which you can easily see it coming as long as you don't jump right away. Just don't let him grab you because if he does, that'll mean an instant ring out, and a loss of life right there. He's the only boss in the game with a desperation move after his HP is 0, and when that happens, immediately run to the edge of either side of the arena and crouch down. Because if you don't, it sure is instant death for you, buddy, and you'll have to start the match all over again. Once the wind dies down, Fujin somehow self-destructs. Okay. Stage 3, the Earth Temple throws in multitudes of traps that can either flatten you, impale you, or even launch you in greater heights that death from a great height is a surefire possibility. It's also on the stage and onwards where the game wants to be so cheap by having enemies respawn in an area where you defeat one enemy only for another to take its place, leaving you no room to breathe.
It might be a good idea also to follow a map online because just about every stage in this game is a labyrinth, and your objective is very much find this one key, find this other key, then find the next key in order for you to progress the stage. And it could get a little bit tedious.
The boss of stage 3 is the Earth God, where you must time your jump kick, immediately slide under him, then press the switch behind him to hit him with his weakness. A falling platform on the head. Yep. Stage 4 is the water level. However, due to contrary belief, you cannot manipulate the stage at all with your ice powers. Instead, you'll have to put up with electric eels that can be killed, and avoid drowning altogether. Although I do find the death cutscene to be really funny. Let's see that again.
You know, that cutscene is so funny that maybe, just maybe, with a little bit of sound editing, I could probably make it sound better.
The boss in stage 4 is the Water God, and its moves are somewhat predictable if you could see it coming. Try to freeze him at the right time, then uppercut. Lather, rinse, repeat. Stage 5 is the Fire Temple, where standing on fire will gradually make you lose HP, and it supports annoying, invisible, dashing monks that love to run away after landing their combos on your face. And this stage also has another cheesy falling cutscene. Holy cow! I guess Sub-Zero's power level is over 9,000, that touching lava would make him a huge hydrogen bomb. Speaking of explosions, how do you like that explosion sequence? It's nothing more than stock explosion superimposed onto a yellow-orange screen that's supposed to represent lava. If that isn't cheap production, I don't know what is. Toasty! Stage 5 isn't that bad, and the Fire God is not too intimidating either, despite having maximum resistance to ice. Just before the slide on him, and you'll win the battle easily. After that's done, Sub-Zero ascends the stairs to retrieve the amulet, only for Quan Chi to suddenly show up and run off with it to revive the fallen Elder God Shinnok. After that, Raiden shows up, all ticked off, and said, "Hey idiot, you started this! Fix it!" Stage 6 is the Netherrealm prison, where the opponents get tougher and gigantic sledgehammers are waiting for you. Eventually you'll run into a scripted scene where guards beat up Sub-Zero unconscious, and it's from there that one of two cutscenes play out. If you perform a fatality as a Scorpion in Stage 1, you'll encounter his Spectre form in Stage 6 and have a rematch with him, complete with a new moveset, making him much harder than before. However, if you decide to spare Scorpion, Sub-Zero still gets thrown in jail, and behind him is the game's other antagonist, Shinnok. Yes, that's Shinnok. Only in this game, his voice doesn't sound too threatening.
Oh, I'll be leaving this realm shortly.
After that scene, you can just escape the cell with no problem. Stage 7 is the bridge, a gauntlet of giant enemies itching to stop you, whether it be a giant robot with a flamethrower, or an enemy guard riding a fire-breathing dinosaur. However, just seconds into Stage 8, executioners will immediately run towards you, usually following up with an uppercut. And I hate these guys so much that the second I shatter one guard, another takes his place in mere seconds. It's also back to being a labyrinth, so you better have that guide ready, as you have 3 boss battles to fight for the keys, which are Quan Chi's assassins. One of them is Serena, who you will see again in later games. And they can really wail on you if you let them. You'll lose many lives in their battles until you get their patterns right. Once you got their keys, it's time for the fight on the top floor against Quan Chi. Quan Chi tries to have Sub-Zero join his Brotherhood of Shadow, which he refuses. Yeah, it's hard to take Quan Chi's acting really seriously, but at least it's no worse than his cartoon counterpart. His moves can hit hard, can stun you with his wave attack, and can confuse you by teleporting. Perhaps your best opening is when he's about to conjure up a fireball at your face, you freeze him at the right time and uppercut him. Keep doing that until his HP goes red. Why red? If you decide to spare Serena in your match against her, she'll deliver a final blow on Quan Chi. Quan Chi falls and somehow he blows up. No, that scream won't cut it. Remix! Serena begs for Sub-Zero to help her escape the Netherrealm, but before he can give us reason to why he can't do so, lo and behold, Serena was killed out from behind by Shinnok, only this time with a goofy smile on his face. No matter what you do, you can't damage Shinnok at all. Instead, lure him to a nearby teleportation device and time your freeze blast just right. Then use the device to appear on the other side of the arena and just simply take the amulet away from Shinnok. Simple, right? Shinnok will then have a second form, and the portal will be there for you just to run away and escape, ending the game.
There's actually a legitimate way to defeat Shinnok, and that involves a move called Polar Blast, which is basically a screen nuke, or in Sub-Zero's case, a freeze nuke. But you better be sure you have enough urns to spare, because that one can take up a whole SP bar, and you better have good reflexes to be sure you don't get killed.
And I really mean it when I said you need enough urns on your person, because Polar Blast will definitely take up a whole SP bar. And it takes about 5 Polar Blasts to take down Shinnok. Once that's done, you can escape to the portal with ease. Sub-Zero gives back the amulet to Raiden, and returns to the Lin Kuei headquarters, where the Grandmaster introduced Sub-Zero to Shang Tsung, asking him to be a participant in the Mortal Kombat tournament, setting up the stage for the first game in the series. And then the credits roll. After the credits, you'll be taken to a blooper and outtakes reel of the actors portraying the characters. After that, more credits.
Overall, this game is not very good. Using the fighting game engine to incorporate into an adventure game is executed very poorly. Kinda similar to the console versions of Batman Forever. The experience system could have been much more than just learning new moves, because not getting any HP or SP raised from it though kinda diminishes the player's confidence into continue playing. Also, there could have been infinite continues, because I had to burn through a lot of continues and a lot of lives just to beat this freaking game. Not to mention the fact, it could have been linear point A to point B rather than having to collect stupid items just to progress with the game. Keeping the game a lot more linear could have been simple enough. And despite the cheesy cutscenes, the story is not that bad though. At least it's a good story for a Mortal Kombat 1 prequel. But in the end, the rest of the game just falls flat. So, what am I gonna rate this game? Well... And that's another review in the books. Hope you enjoyed what you see here, and stay tuned for the next review video. Until then, this is Musashi X, and I bid you all farewell, and take care.